بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Last week we were discussing Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and one little bit we discussed how he was fortunate enough to marry two daughters of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and also how whenever the Ummah and the Muslim needed assistance and support, and Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu ta'ala anhu was always there at the forefront. After Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu passed away, then the mantle of Khilafah came upon Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And when he became the Khalifa, then فتح الله على يديه أرمينية والقوقاز ونصر المسلمين وسودهم على خراسان وكرمان وسجستان وقبرص وطرف غير قليل من أفريقية. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had expanded the Muslim lands far and wide. In the Far East, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had brought Khurasan, which is in Iran and northern Iraq area, Kerman, Sijistan, which is in the Uzbek and the Central Asia area, Kubrus, Cyprus as well, and similarly Armenia and the Caucasus, which is surrounding areas, the Albania, etc., and also a large part of Africa, all had now been included within the lands and within the hudud of the Islamic Empire. وَلَقِيَ النَّاسِ فِي عَهْدِهِ مِنَ الثَّرَاءِ مَا لَمْ يَحْظَ بِهِ شَعْبٌ عَلَى ظَهْرِ الْأَرْضِ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, during the time of Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, made it such that people had so much wealth that nobody else throughout the globe had been fortunate enough to have such wealth during his time. حدث الحسن البصري رضي الله تعالى عنه عما نعم به الناس في أهل ذي النورين من الرخاء وبلهنية العيش. Sayyidina Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed the Muslims during his time with luxury and with ease and comfort during the time of Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan. He says that رأيت منادي عثمان بن عفان رضي الله عنه ينادي قائلا. He says when Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala anhu was a Khalifa, I heard a person making an announcement, and he would make this announcement and he would say, أيها الناس أغدوا على عطياتكم. O people, come take your gifts. So people would come, and يغدون عليها ويأخذونها وافية, and they would come and they just take loads and loads of gifts which were just there from the royal treasury. And thereafter, أيها الناس أقبلوا على أرزاقكم. Come take from your rizq and your sustenance. And people would come, فَكَانُوا يُقْبِلُونَ عَلَيْهَا, and there'll be just piles and mounds of so much different types of produce there. And people, فَيُعْطُونَهَا غَزِيرَةً وَفِيرَةً, they would just get large portions and amounts and surplus amounts. وَلَقَدْ سَمِعَتْهُ وَاللَّهِ أُذُنَايَ وَهُوَ يَقُولُ أُغْدُوا عَلَى كِسْوَتِكُمْ. Come take your clothes. And they'd come and there'd be all different types of luxury clothing, and they would just be given it as gifts as part of the token from the state. فكانوا يأخذون الحلل السابقة وكان يقول هلموا على السمن والعسل أيضا. Come get your butter, your honey, and in this manner, different things did come, and people would just get large surplus amounts. Such was the how wealthy the Islamic State had become during the time of Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu ta'ala. كان خير كثيرا وذات البين سعيدة. The relationship between the people was also very harmonious. ولم يكن على ظهر الأرض مؤمن يخاف مؤمنا وإنما كان المسلم يألف المسلم ويواده وينصره. And the people were living very harmoniously, and there would be no fear from anybody. They'd be extremely friendly to one another, love, compassion, helping one another, looking out for one another. But ولكن بعض الناس إذا شبعوا بطروا. When people start to receive a bit of comfort, that's when, as you say, masti jara. They start to rebel, and they start to now think they've got nothing else to do. Everything's easy, comfortable life. So now they start to rebel and they start to cause mischief. وَإِذَا أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ كَفَرُوا. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses somebody, then they start to deny these favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَعَتَبَ هَؤُلَاءِ عَلَىٰ عُثْمَانَ أُمُورًا. So they started to criticize Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala anhu regarding certain affairs of his khilafah, the reality of which was that لو فعلها غيره ما عتبوها عليه. If it was anybody else, they wouldn't have batted an eyelid. But because the comforts, the ease was there, number one, and number two, Uthman radiyallahu anhu was quite soft-natured as well, and he wouldn't really rule with an iron fist and wasn't very stern like his predecessor Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. ولم يكتف هؤلاء بالعتب. But that wasn't the only case. The thing is that they didn't only criticize Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala anhum. If that was all they did, wouldn't have been anything major. Rather, فَلَقَدْ ظَلَّ الشَّيْطَانُ يَنْفُخُ فِي أَرْوَاحِهِمْ مِنْ رُوحِهِ وَيَبُثُّ فِي نُفُوسِهِمْ مِنْ شَرِّهِ. Shaitan started to whisper into their ears, and Shaitan started to conjure up ideas within their minds. حتى تألبت عليه طائفة كبيرة من أوباش الأمصار فحسروه في داره نحو من 40 ليلة ومنعوا عنه الماء العذب. So much so that they, a group of rebellious individuals, got together and they put Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala anhu under siege and under house arrest. He was unable to leave his house for 40 days. And they even stopped all water going towards his house. وَقَدْ تَنَاسَى هَؤُلَاءِ الظَّلَمَةُ الطَّغَمَةُ أَنَّهُ هُوَ الَّذِي اشْتَرَى بِئْرَ رُومَةٍ مِنْ مَالِهِ الْخَالِصِ لِيَرْتَوِيَ مِنْهُ سُكَّانُ الْمَدِينَةِ الْمُنَوَّرَةِ وَرُوَّادُهَا. And these people forgot that it was Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala anhu who, when in Medina Munawwara, the people needed water. The people needed water. It was Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala anhu who bought the well of Bi'r Ruma. The well of Ruma. It belonged to a Jew, and the Muslims needed water. All the other wells was salty water. This was the only well at that moment which had sweet water. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked the Sahaba, is there anybody that can provide water for the Muslims? So Uthman radiyallahu anhu said, I'll go and I'll buy Bi'r Ruma. When he went and he offered to purchase, that Jew said of Medina Munawwara that, no, I am not going to sell it to you. So he said, I'll offer you this much, I'll offer you this much. I'll continue to raise the price until he decided that, okay, I'll sell you half. I'll sell you half of it. We'll both share it, 50-50. So he ended up buying 50% of the share for a very high price, and then what Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu said was that on my turn, the water is free. And that person, he'd still take money for the water. So obviously nobody would go on his day. And when it would be the time of Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu, everybody would come and drink water. So he lost his business anyway. So Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu was then approached by him, and he said that, look, you can buy the other half as well. So Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu bought the second half of the wealth, the 50% share, and thereafter he made it work for the people of the Muslims of Medina Munawwara, and he says you can just drink the water of this as much as you want. So he is the one who very first provided water to the people of Medina, and now he himself has been stopped from water, and they have prevented water from going to him. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُمْ قَبْلَ ذَلِكَ مَاءٌ عَذْبٌ يَرْتَوُونَ مِنْهُ ثُمَّ إِنَّهُمْ حَالُوا دُونَهُ وَدُونَ الصَّلَاةِ فِي مَسْجِدِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. They prevented him even coming towards the masjid to perform salat in Masjid al-Nabawi. وَقَدْ تَعَامَ هَؤُلَاء أَنَّ ذا النورين هو الذي وسع ثاني الحرمين من خالص ماله ليتسع للمسلمين بعد أن ضاق بهم ذرعا. And again, they forgot this fact that when in the 7th year of Hijrah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wanted to expand Masjid al-Nabawi, then the land which was adjacent to the current masjid, that was purchased by Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu and made work for Masjid al-Nabawi. So it was him who allowed the expansion of Masjid al-Nabawi, and now it is him who is prevented from getting to Masjid al-Nabawi. ولما اشتدت على عثمان الكرب وتفاقم عليه الشر نفر إلى حمايته نحو من 700 من الصحابة وأبنائهم. When times got quite difficult and the situation became tough on Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, then at that moment approximately 700 Sahaba Ikram radiyallahu ta'ala anhum and their children, they came to Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, the likes of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-Khattab, wa Abdullah ibn Zubayr ibn al-Awam, wal Hasan wal Husayn ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib, wa Abu Hurayrata radiyallahu ta'ala anhu wa ghayruhum. But لكن عثمان ذا النورين صاحب الهجرتين وباذل المعروف آثر أن يراق دمه على أن تراق دماء المسلمين دفاعا عنه. They said that we will fight for your cause, and these individuals that are surrounding your house, we will deal with them. Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu anhu says, I do not want an individual's blood being shed because of me. I don't want anybody dying because of me. وفضل على أن تزهق روحه على أن يقتتل المسلمون دونه. He says, I am willing to give my own life, but I do not want Muslims fighting in my name. فعزم على الذين نفروا إلى حمايته أن يتركوه لقضاء الله. So he said to those individuals that came to fight for him that please, you may go, let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow whatever he decrees. وقال لهم أقسم على من لي عليه حق أن يكف يده وقال لأرقائه من أغبد منكم سيفه فهو حر. He said to his slaves that whosoever from amongst you puts their sword in their sheath, then that person is set free for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All his slaves obviously were looking for freedom, and they all put their swords back into their sheath, and they were all granted freedom as well. وَلَقَدْ غَفَتْ عَيْنُ خَلِيفَةِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ لَحَظَاتٍ قُبَيْلَ مَسْرَعِهِ. During this time, once he fell into a slight state of slumber, فَرَأَى النَّبِيَّ الْكَرِيمِ عَلَيْهِ أَفْضَلُ الصَّلَاةِ وَأَزْكَى التَّسْلِيمِ. And whilst he was in this state of slumber, he was blessed with the ziyarah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وَمَعَهُ صَاحِبَاهُ أَبُو بَكْرٍ الصِّدِّيقِ وَعُمَرُ بْنُ الْخَطَّابِ. Along with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, with his two companions, Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu. وَسَمِعَ الرَّسُولُ صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول له أفتر عندنا الليلة يا عثمان. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said to him, that Uthman, tonight make iftar with us. Tonight make iftar with us. فأيقن عثمان أنه لاحق بربه مقبل على لقاء نبيه. At that moment, he understood and his heart told him that tonight will be the moment I will return to my Creator. And tonight will be the moment where I will meet my beloved Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam. That day, Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala anhu was in the state of fasting. دعا بسراويل طويلة فلبسها خشية أن تكشف عورته. Such haya was in the life of Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu anhu. He knew the inevitable was about to come, so he donned a very long garment, long piece of clothing, afraid of this fact that during the attack, when he is attacked, his aura and his satar does not become exposed. إذا قتله الأثمة السفاحون. وفي يوم الجمعة, was the day of Jum'ah, ثمانية عشرة ليلة خلت من ذي الحجة, the 18th of ذي الحجة, قتل العباد الزهاد الصوام القوام, this great devout servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one who would fast greatly, would stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout the night. It is said that he would recite the entire Quran throughout the night. Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu anhu, Jama'ul Quran al-Kareem, the one who compiled the Quran al-Kareem. During the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the Quran al-Kareem was not compiled. Then during the time of Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu, a copy of the Quran was compiled, and then this continued until the time of Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu anhu, when during the different qira'ats and the different methods of recitation, so Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu anhu then compiled another final version of the Quran, in which included within itself all the different variants and recitations of the qira'at of the Quran al-Kareem. So he is known as Jami'ul Quran, the one who compiled the Quran al-Kareem. Sihru Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the son-in-law of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. فَلَحِكَ بِجَوَارِ رَبِّهِ وَهُوَ ظَمْآنٌ صَائِمٌ وَكِتَابُ اللَّهِ مَنْشُورٌ بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ. He returned to his Lord in the state that he was thirsty. Whilst fasting, he made iftar in the hereafter, and when he left this world, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was open in front of him. He was there sitting, reading the Quran. The individuals walked in. Whilst he just continued looking down and reading. His wife Naila was also there. She tried to stop the attack, and her hand was lost during this, and then he was made shaheed, and his blood splattered over the pages of the Quran al-Kareem, and he gave his life at that moment. وحسب المسلمين عزاء أنه لم يكن في قتل عثمان رضي الله عنهم أجمعين سحابي ولا ولد سحابي إلا رجلا واحدا شارك البغاة الطغاة في أول الأمر ثم استحيا وارتدع. And it must be known that it was only the rebellious individuals that attacked Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu anhu. No Sahabi, no a son of a Sahabi was part of the group which came to attack Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu anhu. It was just some individuals who had issues, who had problems, and it was a bit of a political situation as well, from exterior forces as well, which came and tried to create that disunity between the Muslims. And this was the first time the Muslims then became disunited, and since that day they have always been the different factions of the Muslims. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also give us that connection with the Quran which Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu ta'ala anhu had. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to leave this world whilst we are engaged in the tilawat of the Quran, whilst we are also eager to meet Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Sallallahu ta'ala khayra khalq Muhammad.